So hi everyone, my name is Katie Crocker and I am the CEO of AMSSA, and I wish to acknowledge that I am on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And in this time, I really feel committed to working with the sector, to listening and learning about our accountability on the land, in particular in the work we do, welcoming newcomers to unceded and stolen lands, and digging deep to find out more what we can do as a sector to support Indigenous communities and the understanding and knowledge of newcomers on Indigenous land. So today we continue with our series of interviews that AMSSA is gathering under the name Memoirs of the Newcomer Integration Sector. And so, we're really starting to see some retirements, people moving on to different sectors. There's a lot of change coming up in our sector. And so we wanted to capture the creation of the settlement agencies, the sector as we know it now, through the stories and journeys of the founders, of the people who were, who've been here for 20, 30 years and really pivotal in shaping the way we do our work. So today is our second interview, and our leader today is Patricia Woroch, who has been the Chief Executive Officer of ISSofBC since 1998. And Patricia is going to be interviewed by Ajlin Mehmedi, Manager of Settlement Programs at ISSofBC. So ISSofBC was created in 1972. In its early days, the agency responded to the plight of the Vietnamese boat people. Almost 50 years later, ISSofBC is now one of the largest immigrant serving agencies in Canada. Every year, ISSofBC supports more than 20,000 people with a broad range of services through 400 staff and 17 offices located in Metro Vancouver and across BC. In 2015, ISSofBC took the lead role in the largest resettlement plan in recent history by receiving over 2,000 Syrian government-sponsored refugees. So after 24 remarkable years as CEO of ISSofBC, Patricia Woroch will take a well-deserved retirement at the end of August 2021. During her tenure, ISSofBC has become a recognized global leader in the immigrant serving sector, leading unprecedented expansion from 2 to 17 offices in Metro Vancouver, Squamish, and Northern BC. Patricia oversaw the development and opening of ISSofBC Welcome House, a world-class innovative service hub for newcomers. Patricia received in 2017 the YWCA Women of Distinction Award for propelling change through her leadership, professionalism, and vision within the nonprofit sector, and for making a significant and sustained difference in Metro Vancouver. Ajlin Mehmedi is a settlement services manager at ISSofBC Welcome House in Vancouver. She arrived at ISSofBC 21 years ago as a government-assisted refugee, and she has been working in the organization for over 15 years. So I encourage everyone to sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, and enjoy as we hear from Ajlin and Patricia.
Thank you, Katie. I would like to start with the first question, which is, what was the impetus and the initial goal of forming the organization?
So ISS, it was actually called Greater Vancouver Immigration Services at the very, very beginning. And that was back in the 60s. And it was an informal group of volunteers who were just helping people, newcomers. And then what happened was, for those of you who are history fans will remember Idi Amin and Uganda. And with the dispelling of the Ismailis. And at that time, the then Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, had asked the local MP if he could get this group of volunteers to formalize and help these Ugandan refugees. And they did. And so in 1972, the organization became a registered society, but it had actually been active for at least 10 years prior to that. And so the first large group of people to come to through the services were the Ugandans. And at that time, the organization actually was located in an office with the then whatever IRCC was called at the time. I think it was probably something like Manpower and Immigration, um, as well as the city, who was also very involved in working with newcomers. So it's been around for a very long time. It was the first formal settlement agency in British Columbia.
Amazing. I was the client later
Oh,
on, so I'm happy that it was there. um, could you tell us just what were like the triggers to the involvement? I know you mentioned that the then Prime Minister had asked for help, but
yes.
what were the triggers that the organization was interested to
I
step
think
in?
more than anything, from what I understand of the history, we're all immigrants at some, whether it's 2 generations back, 5 or 7 or whatever it's been, but we all come from that background. So I think that there was a great deal of sensitivity of people understanding the challenge of coming to a new country, oftentimes without language, without um, uh, knowledge of the country, and just kind of being plunked down in the middle of nowhere. And just how much a helping hand would the difference that would make. And in fact, I know that I saw an old Vancouver Sun article, and it was so interesting because what evolved into what we call became the host program and then kind of community bridging was actually done by nurses. So there's this fantastic photograph of all these nurses back in the day when you could get on runways. This wonderful picture of all these nurses in their white uniforms with the hat, the
Yeah,
nurse's hat, and they're all standing by this airplane as people are coming off the off the plane. So it really was about helping and just kind of making a difference in people's lives, and easing that journey, which, as we know from being involved in the work, is really a challenge, and can be very complex and different. And having that helping hand makes a difference. And 50 years later, it's still making a difference. So I think the motivation has always remained the same for all of us who are in the settlement sector.
so I would like to ask you as well, what was the priority work of the organization in its early years?
I think in the early years, it was helping people do the basics. So helping them find a place to live, which oftentimes was challenging. Helping them to understand some of the government systems that were really critical. For example, registering their children in school, helping them register their children in school, um, helping them understand the way of life and the way things happen in Canada that may or may not be different from wherever it was that they were coming from. Um, and then those things like, working on language acquisition, and as you know, people who come here, one of the first things they want to do is they really want to be working.
Yeah.
That just seems to be the story for everyone that we see, and so that was also part of the journey. So I always have thought it's very interesting that really and honestly, the journey has not changed from the very beginning. Those same needs that were there probably hundreds of years ago when the first settlers came to Canada, it's still the same. It's how do you make a life in a new country? What do you need to do to have a good life in that country? How do you get to contribute? How do you settle? And anything that settlement agencies can do to help that process. And it used to, as you know, it used to fall, oftentimes it used to fall in the hands of churches or faith groups, sometimes family, if you were lucky enough to have family in Canada who came here before. And more often than not, it was very much hit and miss. If you were really lucky and you met the right person who could help you wend your way through all these new things, new governments, new rules, new regulations, you were lucky, but a lot of times you just got left out. So having that formalized process just, I think, really drastically shortened that time that you needed to acclimate and to settle and to become however you define Canadian to how you became that person. That changed with, I think, with settlement agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you said, it's very important having, I mean, the right people on the right spot, because as they arrive, as newcomers arrive, the first people they meet, it's the ones that are making the biggest impression. So
Yes. Yeah.
that kind of gives you the drive, like the positivity. Oh, I can do it. I am at the right place. I'm getting the right information that I need, because you can imagine that everybody's kind of lost. You have your own goals,
Absolutely.
you have your vision, but you don't know how you're going to realize that. So when you meet the
Yeah.
right person, like you said, then getting the right information, that kind of gives you that positive energy and the drive to fight for
Absolutely.
that. Yeah,
And
thank you.
it's for me, one of the really wonderful things about working in this sector, and whether it's working or volunteering, is I think you get as much back as you give. And I think, for example, I can't even remember how many years ago. I think it's probably close to 40 years ago. My husband was a volunteer with what was then Surrey Delta Immigrant Services, which it actually was one of the programs that ISSofBC established. And then some years later, probably about 30 years ago, I became a volunteer there as well.
Wow.
And it's interesting when you think about how rich that experience made you by connecting with people who had different ideas, different thoughts, and yet so many similarities. And sharing your lives with each other was such an amazing experience. It's a gift. It really is a gift.
Thank you, Patricia. Can you tell us about major successes in early years that gave you momentum to continue?
I think a lot, one of the things that we've done because we're the agency that up until a couple of years ago, we were the only agency who received government assisted refugees. So we saw successive waves of people from different countries. And Katie had mentioned the Vietnamese migration, and certainly we saw that. We saw, first it was the Ugandans. We also saw a lot of people out of Hungary, out of Czechoslovakia, and then much later people from the Balkan states. Um, any successive wave of migrants have come through, and those have always been really successful, very interesting, very experimental in the sense that having this very large group of people, and I think they called it Operation Parasol with the people from Kosovo. And there were just hundreds and hundreds of people coming in, and very much most recently with Syrians. But learning from those experiences as to what you can do better, what you need to put into place, how you need to prepare community, and how community responds to that, depending very much on how as the settlement agency, have prepared them for that to happen. The involvement of governments, all levels of government, to make sure that people are informed, that they have the information that they need. And I'm talking about community. I'm not talking about the people coming in. All those things are so important, but if you do them, and I'm not saying you're ever going to do them perfect, because that can never happen. But if you do have some idea, some parameters that you set to accomplish that, I think that they're enormously successful. And I think of the success of groups that have come in and who have become such a part of our community. You think that they've been here since the beginning of time, kind of thing, that
Yeah.
that they've melded, they've become part of our community. And so yes, I think that there was a lot of successes like that, um, uh, in the early days.
Thank you. That's great to hear. So moving on from the early days, I would like to ask you a little bit about the crisis. And I know we always have them. Can you tell us about the time when the organization faced a major crisis?
All agencies go through crises when there are things like changes of government,
Mhm.
because you have change of policies, change of direction, change of points of view. So that creates crisis. But I also like the thing about crisis always provides opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think we have tried very hard to take advantage of that, and learn from it. I think that space is always a crisis, and that's not just for us; it's for NGOs in general. And certainly, one of the ways that we work to resolve a crisis of space was the development of Welcome Center.
Yeah.
I think that funding is always puts organizations into a crisis mode, and again, how you deal with it can sometimes be very telling. And one of the things, as you're aware, that we've done is that many years ago, I think it's 27 years now, we started a social enterprise called the LCC. And that's been enormously successful and very helpful, because it's provided the funds to um, fill gaps where we see that there's a gap in service. We're able to provide that service because of that. But I think that we honestly, when I think back, certainly in my time, there is nothing that I would consider a major crisis. One of the things that I've learned in working in the social services field in general was that boy, it's never about one person, I tell you. You know, it's really not. And I have been just incredibly fortunate to have wonderful boards, wonderful leadership teams, like colleagues that I work with, um, supportive community members. I mean, we do so much together on a collaborative basis, and staff who have come in and who are really committed to honoring the mission statement. And it's kind of when you have that, it for me, it feels like you can handle anything. You know,
Yes.
we just put our nose to the grindstone and we figure out how to get through it. And that really is a concerted effort by many people. But we do it, and we've been doing it for 50 years. So it's a successful formula.
It is. They don't say it in vain. It takes a village to raise a child.
It does. It really does. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, in your opinion, what makes the organization special, besides on things that you mentioned,
Huh.
people and
I think that there's always been a philosophy in the organization that client service is paramount, and excellent uh, client service is what you should be striving for. So I think all the decisions that are made by us, previous to me and with me, all the decisions that we make are always about client service. What is the best thing we can be doing to make the lives of the people that we serve better? And I think serve is a really important word because this job is not about us. It really is about who we serve. And I think that that does, to a great extent, make us unique, and make us one of the places that we have. I mean, we've had people from literally all around the world come to see what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so that says something about. In fact, I was just looking at some information when the members of the European Union Parliament came to see us, um, and were asking us how come you're successful in doing what you're doing and we're struggling, and I thought that was a very sort of telling comment from them about us,
Yeah.
about our reputation internationally, that they would come to us and ask us that question. So I think it's sort of all of those things together.
Looking back on your career in the sector, can you tell us about one of the achievements that you are most proud of?
Oh, wow. Well, it has to be Welcome Center. That was, it was really funny when I first started. Um, one of the first things I'd said, and I wasn't the first one because the two people before me said the same thing. But one of the first things I said was, "Oh my goodness, we need to have better premises." Um, and that was with Drake Street, which was kind of falling apart even 25 years ago. Um, and so, um, I keep saying that this welcome center was really probably about a 50-year plan.
Yes.
But I had actually found two other things before, and they just didn't work out. So when the thinking around Welcome Center, the current Welcome Center came up, I was thinking, well, I'll put some energy into it, but I really need to think about it because I've already tried this and it hasn't worked all that great. So I'll give it a try. But I think that it is an outstanding building. I love that it has that community sense, that it's more than just bricks and mortar. It's about who's inside there. It's about the people who come to us, and it's the people who provide the service, and it's about that working with the other groups. It really is a community inside this the bricks and mortar. And I feel really, really proud of that. The other thing that I feel so good about is that um, we have some wonderful, wonderfully accomplished people in the organization. Um, and I love that people stayed because they made that commitment to the organization. And I like to think that, that part of that was because of the environment and the culture of the organization. And I'm really proud of that too. As you know, I love our annual meetings and the
Yes,
recognition
they are amazing.
because of that, because people stay, they say, oh, well, I came for 3 years and somehow it's 15 years later, like you're saying. And
Yeah.
I really did think I was only going to be here 3 years, but the clients are so interesting. The work is so interesting. The sector is so interesting and challenging. So I'm staying. Here I am, like all these years later. So I like that. I feel good about that too.
Great. So how did your professional adventure in the sector change you? Is there
Oh,
something you
wow.
share
Well,
with us?
you know what? I think the first thing is I learned so, so, so much. Um, and I learned from our staff, because the vast majority of our staff, as you know, have come from other places, and for so many people, to share their lives with me, which was such a gift, and to learn about, there were things about countries I never knew. You learn when you're in school, you learn this map and you see all of these places, and
Yes.
you have to memorize them, and probably what metal comes from that, from that,
Yeah.
um, or what's their main export, kind of thing, and that's all. You don't think anything about it.
Yeah.
um, and finding out how people live, what they think, what are the things that are the same, what are the things that they approach differently from me, all of those things. I have just learned so much. I honestly think that I'm a better person for having been in that job, because I've learned so much. And I'm a continuous learning, so that has been just the best thing for me. And obviously you develop more skills. Like
Yes.
whether you want them or not, you have to learn how to do certain things. And that's always really great for you. How you can never complain about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything more that you can learn is a benefit to you and a bonus to you. So yeah, I think I've really grown just as a human, um, with this job. And I honestly feel so privileged to have been a part of people's lives, and for them to allow me to be a part of their lives. That's just been really such a privilege. It really has been.
What words of advice would you give to the next generation of the sector leaders?
I think for me, the best advice I could give anybody is listen.
Mhm.
Listen to everybody around you. Listen, whether you want to or not, listen to everybody from government to don't rush to judgment. Don't rush to decisions. Listen, and actually hear what people are saying, because I think you really need to do that to inform your decisions. And as a leader, wherever you are, whatever kind of work you're doing, but as a leader, and leaders don't have to have titles, by the way. Leaders are people who just take charge, take responsibility, but you are responsible. And so whatever decisions that you're making are going to impact people. And it doesn't matter whether it's one person or 35 million or whatever it is, but
Yeah.
your decisions are going to impact people. So you need to listen and hear what needs to inform your decision. And you might make a decision that isn't necessarily in line with what you've heard, but you need to know that you've made that decision with as much information as you have, as much thought as you can put into it, and that you are willing to stand up for. And that I think is the biggest thing, because I think we've become kind of a Google society. We can get really quick answers, just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'll do that. You I think that that's just a really bad way to go.
In your opinion, could you tell us what is next for the organization?
So I think that what is next for the organization is a couple of things. One is whether people are open to it, or I know most people are, but there's some people I think it'll be a little bit of a challenge. But there's no question that we have a digital world,
Mhm.
and we need to take a couple of steps even further than we are now. So I think that that's going to be the focus for the next couple of years for sure. And then I think the other absolute big focus, we just started it, as you know, in the last year. In 2020, we started the anti-racism to really look at diversity, inclusion, equality, equity, all those issues which are just critically important, reconciliation, and are even more important as we go into the future. So that absolutely will be top of mind
Yeah.
and a priority for the organization. There's no question about that.
Thank you so much, Patricia. As always, it's a pleasure to listen to you, to learn from you, and your piece of advice is very valuable to all of us. I mean, I
Oh,
personally can say, as a newcomer, as a client, as a staff now, I have always been empowered by your words and the actions. So it was a
thank
pleasure
you.
hearing from you today.
Well, thank you so much.
I've been listening. I've been on the edge of my seat. I've been yelling at my computer screen. I've been laughing. I think I got a little teary. Or like it's like a reality show. And yeah, I destroyed a paper clip, which is what I do, and I get really like gross and something fantastic. What a great opportunity to see the connection between the two of you. I think is so wonderful. It's, you know, we go about our work and we do our work, and we hope that at the end of the day we make an impact. And Patricia, you know, I can tell you've made an impact on me. I can see you've made an impact on Ajlin, and you've
So
made an
much.
impact on this sector. And so you leave a beautiful, wonderful legacy behind. And we're excited to watch what you do and you do. And well, huge thank you to both of you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Patricia,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you before you go.
Oh, for sure. For sure.